Henry's second story. In the early 18th century, Devizes was a bustling market town in Wiltshire, England. It was a place of deep contrast, home to wealthy merchants, craftsmen, and paupers alike. Life here revolved around the markets, the brewing trade, and the seasonal rhythms of farming. It is here that we meet Henry again. Time has slipped through our fingers since we last saw him. The boy who once lived in the shadow of the workhouse had grown. Henry was now a scholarship boy attending a grammar school. While this was a great privilege, attending such a grand school often left him feeling lesser than the other wealthy boys. He was a good scholar, liked by tutors and students alike, but his heart remained in Devizes. On holidays, Henry returned to the Sutton farm. It was his true home. The Sutton household had grown. They now had 2 young children and a nanny named Jane. Like Henry, Jane had been saved from the poorhouse. She was tall, painfully thin, and shy as a startled rabbit, but she had a wonderful gift with the little ones. She and Henry, both marked by the horrors of their past, understood one another in ways words could not express. Henry's holidays were busy. He was learning the trade of veterinary care from Mr. Sutton. Although the profession was still in its infancy, Henry studied it with devotion. He mucked out barns, fed the animals, mixed basic medications, and prepared bandages. In the evenings, he sat by the fire reading everything he could find about animal care. Patch, his loyal dog, was always by his side. Older and wiser now, he was still Henry's shadow. It was on a late autumn afternoon, with the air sharp with the first whisper of frost, that Henry found the donkey. He had wandered farther than usual, with Patch padding ahead on the narrow lane. A faint braying drifted over the hill. It was weak and uneven, nothing like the full-throated cry of a healthy beast. Curious, Henry followed the sound to a thicket where an old donkey stood tethered to a broken fence post. The creature was painfully thin. Its ribs stood stark beneath a rough coat, and its hooves were long, curled, and split. The donkey lowered its head as Henry approached, appearing more weary than frightened. "Oh, old friend," Henry murmured, placing a hand against the donkey's cheek. The skin was cold, and the breath was warm but sour with hunger. Someone had simply left him. He was too old to work, too slow to keep, and not worth the hay he consumed. Henry's jaw tightened. He could not walk away. He was terrified of being caught stealing and thrown in jail, but Henry swallowed his fear. With quiet words and gentle movements, he loosened the frayed rope and coaxed the donkey onto the path. Step by step, they made their way back toward the Sutton farm, Patch circling protectively as though sensing the creature's fragility. Mr. Sutton raised his brows when he saw them enter the yard. "Well now," he said, his voice half stern, half amused. "Have you brought me another patient, lad?" He was alone. "And in a poor state, sir," Henry answered, shame and concern mingling in his tone. Mr. Sutton examined the donkey, running his knowing hands along its legs and spine. "Thin as a winter shadow," he muttered, "but he has a heart left in him. Let's see what we can do." They worked together for hours. Mr. Sutton taught Henry how to trim the donkey's overgrown hooves, carefully, slowly, never taking too much at once. They brushed out the stiff, tangled coat, revealing patches of soft grey beneath the dirt. Jane brought warm mash sweetened with a little molasses, setting it down as though she were feeding a fragile child. The donkey ate in tiny, grateful mouthfuls. When they finished, Henry wrapped him in an old wool blanket and led him to a stall filled with fresh straw. "He ought to have a name," Jane whispered. Henry smiled for the first time that long day. Brayford, he decided, for the noise he made when he called for us. Brayford's recovery became Henry's constant care. Each morning he mixed feed precisely. He learned to brush with long, even strokes to stimulate circulation and how to soothe cracked skin with warm oil. Patch seemed to approve of their new charge and often slept just outside the stall door. Weeks passed, and Brayford slowly regained his strength. His eyes brightened and his bray grew clearer. Once, in a moment that filled Henry with quiet triumph, the donkey even trotted a few determined steps across the yard. Brayford was happy with his kind new owner, who never burdened him with heavy loads or raised a stick against him. "You've done well," Mr. Sutton told Henry one morning as they watched Brayford nibble hay. "One day you'll make a fine surgeon. Better than I ever was." Henry felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun. He had saved a life, just as he had once been saved. Winter loosened its grip at last, and the farm stirred with early spring tasks. Through it all, Brayford changed from the frail, forgotten creature into a sturdy, steady donkey. He had a soft eye and a warm nuzzle for anyone who entered the yard. He followed Henry like a shadow. If Henry crossed the barn, Brayford's ears pricked up. If Henry called, the donkey came trotting. An uneven trot, perhaps, but full of pride. Patch tolerated this new devotion with mild jealousy, trailing behind to remind everyone that he was Henry's first loyal companion. Brayford soon proved his worth. He carried light sacks of grain to the piggery without complaint, his pace gentle enough for the Sutton children to run alongside him. He stood patiently while Jane draped the washing on the line, and when a neighbour's goat was found with a gash along its flank, Brayford carried the bandage kit across the uneven track. Mr. Sutton arrived to find the wound already cleansed and wrapped by Henry's apprentice hand. "Faith in you, Brayford," Mr. Sutton said afterward, patting the donkey's neck. "You've made a proper helper of him, Henry, better than half the stable lads in Wiltshire." Henry glowed under the praise. Brayford had been abandoned and forgotten. Henry understood that feeling too well. Now, both of them stood upright and useful, having found a place in the world where they were needed. When the Easter holiday ended and Henry prepared to return to grammar school, he felt a pull of homesickness. The Sutton children clung to him, Patch whined, and Brayford followed Henry to the gate, nudging his coat. "I'll be back," Henry whispered into the donkey's rough coat, "and I'll write to you all, even you, old friend." Brayford gave a soft, breathy bray, almost as if in reply. Henry travelled by cart to the town where his school stood. But unlike the boy of years before, who had arrived ragged and uncertain, Henry stepped into the courtyard with a straight back. His clothes fit. His books were his own. His hands were calloused, not from desperation, but from good, honest work. The other boys noticed the change before lessons even began. "They've made a man of you in Devizes," one said, half admiring. "You've grown a head taller," joked another. "Are they feeding you beef every day?" Henry smiled, modest as ever. He answered their questions about the farm, the children, and most eagerly about Brayford. "A donkey," a boy exclaimed. "And he follows you about like a hound?" "He does," Henry said softly. "He needed someone. I suppose I did too." His masters also saw the difference. Where once Henry had bent over his desk like a shadow, now he recited Latin with a clear voice. At night, while the other boys slept, Henry wrote to the Sutton family by the dim glow of his candle. He wrote short, warm letters filled with questions about Brayford's progress. In those days, Henry felt stitched between two worlds, the scholarly halls of learning and the warm, straw-scented barns of home. He belonged to both now. Henry's confidence deepened with every passing week. He felt it when answering a master's question without fear. He felt it when settling quarrels among younger boys. And most of all, he felt it when thinking of the path ahead, the one leading back to Devizes. He was no longer a nameless boy hidden in a dark corner of the workhouse. He was Henry. He was Mr. Sutton's apprentice, a scholar by determination, and a young man with a future shaped by kindness, learning, and the steady affection of an old donkey who had once stood forgotten in a cold thicket.